The Mwananchi budget, the priorities in the next financial year's budget, 2025-2026. The budget policy statement that went through Parliament and was adopted by Parliament was looking at the priority areas that the government wants to focus on in the next year. And like we were told in the kind of civic education that we were given by Kuria Kimani, the chair of the Finance Committee, after that, the next thing that we expect to come to Parliament is two pieces of documents. One is the estimates of the budget, which now goes into budget line by line and say, with this broad focus, this is where the money is going and how this is where we're going to spend 4.2 trillion shillings. And then they'll also come in with a finance bill and say, we target to raise an extra X amount of money, and this is what we need to do. We want to make a couple of changes here and there in various laws, and that will be the finance bill. So finance bill is usually an omnibus bill that is tinkering with various pieces of legislation to head towards that new target of revenue collection. Now, to help us understand more on this, Bernard Njiri, who is a senior research analyst at the Institute of Public Finance, is our guest. Bernard, good morning.
Morning, Latif.
Karibu sana to Fixing the Nation. Yeah, I know that last week, IPF, you had an event where you're looking at the budget and saying, we have come up with a shadow budget, a budget that is more Mwananchi-centric, and that is looking at where we should be spending our money. That's what we want you to tell us. This is the event where Dende Njoro was speaking last week. And alikuwa anafungua roho akisema, by the way, wacheni waambie. By the way.
Even ndio kunaendanga.
Bernard, at least you've interacted with our budgets before. You've looked at our budget policy statement. You've looked at what Parliament is thinking. So you'll take us through that. But before that, Jano, the day's quote.
Jana kuna quote. We're marking the passing of Pope Francis today, so we thought it was only fitting to have a Pope that reflects that, a quote that reflects what the Pope said. We all have the duty to do good. That's the quote today. We all have the duty to do good. He delivered it sometime in 2013 during a homily, or otherwise known as a shorter sermon, so to speak. So he said we all have a duty to do good. What do you make of that? What's your duty to do good?
Thank you. I think as a citizen, my duty to do good is to make sure that we have a budget that is serving the people. And I love that Latif has talked about Mwananchi budget. And our conversation today will be focused on the budget, and then we ask ourselves whether our political class is doing good. Yeah.
It's important. Mwananchi budget.
There's something that was said in that event. In times of fiscal constraints, a responsible budget is not just about numbers, it's about choices. The government must take the lead in cutting wasteful expenditure, choose performance over paperwork, and people over rhetoric.
Wow.
That one just needs to end there, and you drop the mic and turn the leg and something.
It says everything.
Who said that?
Who said that?
Yeah. What is a Mwananchi budget? If we were just to start by telling people, okay, so there's a budget. When we think about a Mwananchi budget, what would a Mwananchi budget look like?
A Mwananchi budget is a document that addresses the concerns of the people, that addresses priorities that citizens would like to see, in such a document, because it's such a critical document in that we, as the citizens, are the ones to finance that through the taxes that we pay. And if the government will finance the deficit through borrowing, it's the Mwananchi who will pay that debt. And we are already feeling the pinch of high debt pressure. So when we talk about a Mwananchi budget, it should be about what people want the government to deliver, be it in the health sector, education sector, or when we are talking about cushioning the vulnerable in the society. So that's a Mwananchi budget. What's the budget doing for me? Can I see the value for money? I'm paying so much taxes, but can I see the value for money, in this document that is about to come? And when we talk about a Mwananchi budget, it's not just the numbers that are read. we go a step further to look at other critical issues, such as budget implementation. For example, if you look at the financial year 24-25, the health sector was allocated 118 billion. But if you look at the Controller of Budget report, the first half of the current financial year, the health budget had only absorbed about 36% of the budget. That is by the half year. So we are talking about up to December 2024. So are we likely to absorb the remaining percentage by June of this year? So if not, was that a Mwananchi budget? Was the budget that was allocated to the health sector meant for Mwananchi? Okay? Then if you look at some offices, because every year we do have in-year adjustments, the so-called supplementary budgets. And then by the end of the financial year, there are some high offices that end up absorbing more than what was allocated in their original budget. So how come a critical sector like health is not absorbing 100%, but there was a room to reallocate resources to some top offices, and they end up absorbing of 100%. So when you look at that now critically, now you ask yourself whether that budget was actually a Mwananchi budget. So it's not just about the numbers that we read. We go a step further to look at how the budget has been implemented. Has it been absorbed? Which sectors, which state departments, which offices? We have to dig deeper.
When did
open
you start
those dark corners?
When did this start happening, the Mwananchi budget comparison? Is this something that's happened over several years?
The Institute of Public Finance has done this now for about 5 years. I think we just launched the 5th edition of this fashion. And every time we look at budget performance, we go historical, and we look at the amount that was allocated in the original estimates, how the budget was absorbed. And we go a step further to look at the sector reports. For example, we look at how a program absorbed its budget, and we analyze that against the level of KPIs that were achieved. And from that now, we ask further questions, whether our budget is being implemented in a manner that is efficient, that is effective. Because you wonder how a program can absorb 80% of the budget, but you only achieve below 50% of the KPIs you had set at the beginning of the financial year.
And is that a trend every year? When you look at when you do it comparatively, what is the trend that you see every year that you're like, how are we here again?
He's got in his notes there, sector goals and their budget trends. I'm looking at it right there.
It's like I'm coming.
And their budget trends.
Yeah, that has been the trend. It's only very few programs where you find a program achieving 100% of the KPIs, against a very magnificent level of budget absorption. And that's why we keep asking some of these critical questions. And they are the same questions we expect Parliament also to ask on the floor of the House. How are we implementing this budget? Is it efficient? Is it effective? Or how can we even reallocate resources through the supplementary budget? But the sector does not adjust the KPIs. How is that realistic?
Right. What's global best practice or global standard for budget absorption versus KPI achievement? Would you have any insights into that?
The best practice should be the budget absorbed need to match the KPIs achieved. Yeah, they should match.
Nilikupea pesa ya kwenda Mombasa.
Yes.
Ni how much fare? Ni umefika Mombasa? Yes. Lakini huwezi kula hiyo fare na uko Mtito Andei.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hiyo ni ukora. That's basically what we are saying. Because
Exactly.
if and several questions that also keep emerging, like you just mentioned, 118 billion shillings allocated to the health ministry. Let's not say sector, because sector is not necessarily it. The implementer of health is the counties. How much were counties given in this year? 400 and in the current financial year.
The current financial year, the estimate, the proposal is 405 billion. Because the current financial year 24-25, it's 380.
Okay.
Then you add arrears, 30 billion. That translates to about 410 billion.
Yes.
So again, when
So
we
let me just finish the point.
Okay.
So 380 billion shillings goes to 47 counties. Okay. These 47 counties have hired doctors, nurses, clinical officers, have hired lab technicians, are running hospitals, are buying medicine, are dealing with 380 billion shillings, which is also paying governors and county assemblies and doing roads and doing all those other things. 380 billion shillings. Let's even say 50% of this money is going into health. What is 50% of 380? Is it 160?
160.
Higher. Not 160,
No,
it is
190.
190. 190 has gone to all those hospitals and paid doctors and all those people in 47 counties, in all those hospitals that we see. 118 billion shillings has gone to Afya House. To do what? Fanya nini?
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Best as you can.
Because it's not paying those doctors in the hospitals.
Yeah.
It's not paying the nurses. When doctors go on strike, CBA, it's not them. It's not this money that is paying. It's doing what? Polio vaccination.
Thank you. I'm sure you understood when the Kenya Kwanza government came to power, the health sector, okay, you are calling it a ministry, it was split into two. We have the State Department for Medical Services and the State Department for
health and standards.
Professional standards.
Yes, public health.
Public
right?
health and
professional
standards. Yes. And if you look at those two state departments, we have LAMCA, that's or we have primary health care duplicated across those two state departments. Where is primary health care domiciled?
Counties, one.
Counties.
Yeah.
So when you see, the national government wanting to control resources, and like you have put it, most of those resources end up at Afya House. What does that tell you? What does that tell Mwananchi? What does that tell our viewers this morning? Why are we
money
keeping...
is being eaten at the top. So when we even see 36%, they've only absorbed 36% of it in 6 months' time. It's no wonder. Hawalipi mshahara, hawanunui madawa, they're only
And
doing...
yet they can see the escalating issues around the health.
Yes.
Exactly. And when we talk about Mwananchi budget, it's good we look at this even through the lens of the private sector, because as we speak, pending bills start at around 706 billion. Who is suffering? It's the private sector. It's the Mwananchi out there, because it's Mwananchi who has done business with the government.
Right.
But your money is stuck somewhere and you are just helpless. You can't do anything about that. And when you see in the budget policy statement or the PBB, the program-based budget that will come, there is no provision even for such pending bills. You keep wondering, how is that a Mwananchi budget? Because there is a woman out there who has done business with government. There is a person with disability who has done business with government. There is a youth who has done business with government. They are suffering out there because of the so-called pending bills. And Latif, I think we have started at a very high gear because it's good for Mwananchi to understand how we come up with the budget, because this is just a wish list. And that's why I talked about the implementation part. Okay? So when we talk about a 4.3 trillion budget in the financial year 25-26, we have the deficit, 831 billion. What is the deficit? And that deficit will be financed through borrowing. But we have the ordinary revenue part, about 2.8 trillion. So if you have a recurrent expenditure of 3 trillion, and our ordinary revenue is 2.8 trillion, what does that mean? We are going to borrow over 200 billion to finance recurrent
expenditure.
Okay?
Kulipa mshahara.
Yes. And we are supposed to borrow to finance development. So if we are borrowing to finance recurrent, we end up digging this hole more and more. And because recurrent expenditure will not translate into returns that will help the country to repay the debt, in the longer term.
Very
okay?
True.
And then the other thing, when we talk about the 2.8 trillion, is it achievable? Is it realistic?
Yeah. Is it?
It's not.
We closed the previous financial year at what, 2.3?
Around 2.2.
2.2 trillion shillings.
Yes.
June last year.
And then, when we were starting the financial year 24-25, our target, ordinary revenue target was 2.7 trillion. It was revised down to 2.4 trillion. Okay?
Yeah.
The first 9 months, up to March of this year, we had done 1.5 trillion. So we won't even achieve the 2.4 trillion. So how is it achievable, the 2.8 trillion, targeted for the next financial year? It's not achievable. So what that tells you is that we are just creating a leg room to borrow. So even the borrowing, the targeted borrowing of 831 billion, we are likely to borrow even more because revenue will underperform.
Right.
So how is that a Mwananchi budget?
Gosh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, go ahead.
No,
Maria.
I was just wondering, because I always ask myself when we have these combobulation, there's a lot going on. I always ask myself when we have these conversations, the people that are making the budget policy statements, where they're creating the budget itself, when they're doing a finance bill into an act, they are very much aware of all these things that you have said as well. Do you have any inclination as to what informs their decision making when it seems to be so against logic? If you know that because even from my seat here, I know that revenue will underperform. It's a trend. We see it in every other day. KRA has not met its targets, has not. Okay? But then how does then someone who's in charge of policy see that and then still continue to overproject, to then spend on recurrent expenditure, to spend on debt servicing, which is a necessity? But unaelewa swali yangu.
Yes, I get your question. And I have now listened to the CS leading the budget, and I have also listened to our members of parliament reacting to the budget. And there is this common phrase, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the most progressive budget in the history of this country. It's a common phrase, and we expect also to hear that this financial year.
Yeah.
How progressive the budget is. You have asked what informs how resources are allocated. Let me give a summary of how the resources have been allocated across the sectors, in just a minute or two.
Right.
National security in the financial year 25-26 will be allocated 257 billion. That is a 17% jump if you compare that with supplementary one in the financial year 24-25. Public administration and international relations, 286 billion. Okay. That 286 billion for the payer sector, it's a decline by 8%. However, if now you dig deeper into the sector, in the financial year 25-26, Executive Office of the President will be allocated 4.7 billion. It's an increase from 3.5 billion in the current financial year. Office of the Deputy President will be allocated 3.4 billion. That is a 33% increase from the 2.5 billion in the current financial year. Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary will be allocated 931 million, sorry. That's an increase from 722 million in the current financial year. Then State House, we have a 75% increase from 4.3 to 7.5 billion. Billion. I'm talking about
4.3 billion to 7.5 billion.
To 7.5 billion. That is a 75% increase. So only those. Let me conclude this.
Okay.
Only those 4 offices I have summarized.
Right.
It's an increase of 5.4 billion. Okay. So when we say the payer sector has a budget cut of 8%, we have some top offices that have 5.4 billion. So the payer sector is not more of a development sector, it's more of service
delivery.
Service delivery.
Public administration and international relations.
Yes.
Where does this, what is it? Is it
that's where now we have the National Treasury, the offices I have led. We have Auditor General, Controller of Budget, Commission on Revenue Allocation. All those offices, they fall under the payer sector.
Okay.
So we have those 4 offices with 5.4 billion increase at a time when there is public outcry. The health sector, we have issues there. We have challenges with the JSS. We have challenges with the new funding model. So when now you look at that deeply, now you understand what informs how resources should be allocated.
Can I pick at a thread kidogo? The sector, though, as a whole, saw an 8% decrease in their budgetary allocation, even though the Office of the President, Deputy President, etc., all seeing increases. So who took the cuts?
the controller of budget?
The controller of budget has a 10% increase, Auditor General 7% increase, Commission on Revenue Allocation 6% increase. But I have a breakdown of, I will give you the state departments that took where the cuts were actually implemented.
That's what if it's state departments taking the cut, but CS, Prime CS, Deputy President, Deputy President, Prime Cabinet Secretary taking increases. Yeah, that does inform
May I have a question?
How allocations happen.
Abu, explain to me, the Office of the President that's going to get 4.7 billion shillings, which one is it? And this one that's going to get 7.5 billion shillings called State House, what do we call it? The bedroom of the president?
No, Modzania Harambe House. Modzania Harambe Avenue, Eric, Ingine Nia, State House Road.
Sawa, but Is that not the office of the president? So State House is including the state lodges. It's State House Nairobi, State House Mombasa, Nakuru, plus the state lodges, right? Office of the president is what? Is it the Ministry of Interior or is it just the office of the president?
Interior is different.
It's different.
Yes.
So what is office of the
Because
president?
remember, we have a budget. We have a budget for the National Police Service, and we have a separate budget for national security.
Okay.
So Interior is at the National Police.
So what is office of the president?
If it's not...
Do we have a PS in the office of the president? Because we have control of State House, that's the accounting officer for State House.
Yes.
Who's the accounting officer for this office of the president?
I only know about the State House Comptroller.
Between Harambee House, Harambee House Annex, State House, Karen, hii pesa ni mingi sana bwana.
And this is what post-renovations.
It's like 15
This is
This is post-renovations.
Right.
That's my biggest.
Right.
And it's renovations Pro Max incoming. Helipad and all included. Okay.
What would this extra 5.4 billion shillings do if it went to Mwananchi instead?
Thank you. It's a good question, and I trust our members of parliament are watching this show because they should help us ask those kind of questions and actually slash that budget. You know, we can retain the budget as is for this current financial year, and then we move that money to the health sector. And I will shock you more, you know, if I tell you how members' contribution is expected to fund the health sector. You know, we are talking about the 204 billion, you know, an increase from 118 billion. Yes, but...
going into health. So I assume part of it is going to pay the, you know, we have the funds, the primary healthcare funds, the
emergency and
the
critical
emergency
illness
fund,
or emergency fund, and then
the emergency critical chronic illness fund.
Yes.
So if money is going into those, then it comes down to the counties, maybe. But also, should it not just be going into the counties so they can fund this themselves? Or let's even say that, yeah, it's being centrally managed by the Social Health Authority. How much money is going to the primary healthcare fund now? So what we say, that somebody who goes to Kimana Health Center, they will go to that center and go back home without paying a shilling because we have increased this budget to 200 and whatever billion shillings. You know, I can see the Mwananchi benefit.
Yes. Yeah, directly actually.
But if it's still going to be 118 billion shillings that's going to be here with Aden Duale and Dr. Amoth and the others, I don't understand why. Anyway, back to the question. Mwananchi, where should the money be going?
Said health.
To actually help Mwananchi. We said health, education, and social protection. Am I right?
Yes.
Is that what the Mwananchi expects? Now I want to throw the other spanner in the works. When we had Governor for Wajir, who's the chair of the Council of Governors, last week here, he said, okay, guys, so on paper, this is what we're talking about. But you tell me which leader is going to come back to the people expecting to be re-elected without a tangible brick and mortar, tangible visual project.
Or bursaries or that kind of thing. That's what he spoke to. That's the Mwananchi expectation.
So the Mwananchi budget then, Bernard, could be, it's not education or health, it's school and hospital and road.
What is the difference between school and hospital and education and health?
Service versus structure.
Should be a combination of both.
Jenga shule versus fanya hospitali, fanya kazi.
Okay.
And remember, we've seen some of these structures vacant.
Yeah.
So that's what they want. But then it hasn't been taken up. It's not being used.
Okay. So then is that the real Mwananchi budget? The school and the hospital and the dispensary and the market and all of that. It's a big question, Bernard.
Thank you. I think it's what the Mwananchi has been made by the politicians to think that a dedicated servant, because now, you have seen me cut the ribbons. We have now opened a state-of-the-art ECD. Okay? But because I have visited now a number of counties, and like you have said, we have so many vacant structures. But when you look at the control of budget reports and the Auditor General reports, we have that fancy word, state-of-the-art ECD center. But when you look at that building, it's just 4 walls and
tiles.
some with tiles and
Colored
some
tiles.
plastic chairs. Okay, so that's the state-of-the-art ECD, and then someone took photos, and then there is, so. But that's what Mwananchi has been made to think. But when now you interact with the citizens, that's not what they expect.
Right.
Because Mwananchi will tell you, we have been spending long queues at the hospital. At the end of the day, you only get Piriton, paracetamol, and if you are lucky enough, amoxil. That's all. And then the rest, you just go and buy. Okay? So that's not what Mwananchi expects. You expect to find a doctor.
Yeah.
When you visit a facility, you expect to be attended in good time. You expect to find a facility near you, with everything that you need, those essential commodities for the health sector. You expect teacher-student ratio to meet the international standard.
Right.
But Mwananchi has been, hoodwinked to believe that development is just about structures.
The brick and mortar.
Yeah, but that's not Mwananchi
What we're
expects.
Before we, there's something that I wanted to ask you. How do we call this a progressive budget then, or a budget policy statement, or budget proposals? Because you said it'll come up a lot that this is the most progressive. Is there anything really progressive about it? Yeah, just so that we don't take away. I know from the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, he'll probably talk about cushioning employees from, shift share, whether it's, deductions. He'll talk about zero budget, so many things. But is there anything that you've seen so far that points towards a progressive budget?
We can't say entirely that the whole budget is bad. There are some good things. For example, if you look at the GECA sector, General Economic and Commercial Affairs sector, there is a 30% increment, and it's a critical sector because that's where industry, the State Department for Industrialization, Tourism, we have other programs like entrepreneurship. It's a critical sector, that can help us address the issue of unemployment. So when we see an increase in such a sector, it's a good thing. When we see an increase, in the health sector, it's a good thing. But now the issue here is, how much money are we allocating to social health insurance fund? How much money are we allocating to emergency and chronic fund? And the money that is expected to finance those two funds, over 90% of that money is expected to come from members' contributions.
Right.
So if that's the case, and you see, we are talking about a wish list. So if, for example, we expect 93 billion to go to social health insurance, emergency and chronic. Remember, that's a projection.
Yeah.
What we project from the members' contribution. Historically, have we been able to achieve those targets?
We have not.
We have not. So that definitely tells you we are not likely to fund social health insurance fund
and emergency
and chronic the way Mwananchi expect. So that means the indigents will not be under health insurance. They won't be covered. Okay? So when you ask what a Mwananchi budget is, a Mwananchi budget should relieve you the burden of spending out of your pocket whenever you visit a health facility, because I have already been deducted the 2.75%. So when I spend more again from my net, okay, the out of pocket, it's eating already into the squeezed disposable income. And that's why, just to mention, VAT target, the revenue correction for VAT target was not met. The first half of the financial year 24-25, it was not met.
Means we are not buying goods.
We are not buying.
We are
That tells you that consumers are spending low on consumption. Households are spending too little on consumption because disposable income has been taken.
Yeah,
yes,
it's been squeezed. I have a quick question. I still get stressed about debt. What's our GDP to debt rate? 65.5%, 65%.
I think more like it's higher than that slightly.
That's what is reported at net present value, because we have to be clear whether we are talking about the nominal value or the net present value.
Oh God! Okay.
How do we realistically dig ourselves out of debt? Realistically. I just want to sleep well for one night.
I don't think we are, because here's the reason. When the draft budget policy statement came out, the initial ordinary revenue target was 3 trillion. Then I remember I raised that issue with the National Treasury, and also made another submission to the Parliament later. But it was revised now from 3 trillion to 2.8 trillion ordinary revenue target. You see, we have revised our ordinary revenue target downward.
Yep.
How about the expenditure side?
Up.
It was not revised downward.
Not touched at all.
Not touched. That's why I'm saying we are not realistic in terms of getting out of the debt mess. We are not. Because there is no way you can have a fiscal framework that is not responsive to the realities of revenue side, but we want to stick to
high
expenditure. We are not realistic when it comes to that. And that's why we keep adjusting the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio.
So what you're saying is, for us to start addressing that elephant, we have to stop spending as much as we are spending. We have to check on our spending.
Absolutely. It's I think it's now inevitable, but if it's not done, then we will end up into the debt mess more and more, because as we speak, about 60% of our revenue is going to service debt. How much is now left to support government operations? How much is left to disperse to the counties? And that's why every financial year we are talking about arrears. When we were starting the financial year 24-25, we had arrears for the county of 30 billion because of the revenue side. Every time, because we have to service debt first before we transfer money to the counties.
Right. I see us in a very precarious position because if we're not spending less, we're not making more. We still have the same things. We're in the same problem. One is spend less. We've called for austerity time and time again, but it just never seems to actually land. The other thing would be spurring an economy that makes more, so that there is more to tax. Because right now it feels like we're taxing, it's taking blood from a stone. Are there any quick, what's the opposite of a stopgap? Things that could spur the economy quickly that would eventually get us to have, a little bit more revenue, a little bit more disposable income. Then your VAT grows, your taxpayer base grows, things like that, from your perspective.
Thank you.
And by quickly, I mean short term, not necessarily cash.
Short term, it's possible. I remember in January this year, I made a point, and I said, at this time when we we have a slowdown, in the economy, because last year our economy grew at an average of 4.6%, and previously our economy has been doing above 5%. So there is a slowdown generally. So at a time like this, we need to stimulate the economy. And one thing I said, and I will repeat here, is that there is this thing called the housing levy, the 1.5%. Depending on where you start, some will say it's a good thing, it's creating jobs, it's doing ABCD. But remember, it's taking 1.5 from the employee and also from the employer. So if we can defer that housing levy even for 2 years, you are adding disposable income to the people. You are creating space for employers even to employ more. We can defer that. Because does it make sense for you to collect 1.5% from the citizens and then you invest that in boards? Did we not hear that? Yes. Take money from the citizens, invest that in boards. So that technically means if we can defer that for 1 year, we already have money that can support that housing program for a year or so. So that's one short-term route that we can take. The other route we can take, you have talked about austerity measures, but it's austerity for who? Because it can't be austerity for just a few state departments. But for others,
it's austerity for Mwananchi, yes, not for.
It's austerity for Mwananchi only, not for
some big offices.
Some big offices, you see. So we have to be very deliberate as a country. If it's about austerity measures, government has to be so deliberate and do it. There has to be that political goodwill. Then the other thing, inflation has eased, and central bank has lowered the CPR, okay? But why are commercial banks not lowering lending rates? You see? Because we also need to have a private sector driven economy. And we can only do that by making investment affordable, by making financing to the private sector affordable. So government has also to be very tough on the commercial banks to lower the lending rates to stimulate the private sector.
But it's more profitable for them to lend to government than to
government lending to itself.
Government lending to itself. We'll stop there. Just before we come back to say goodbye, just a little teaser of what's coming up. It's Your World. We'll have Mwikali and Winnie. And look at that topic, recognizing the end of a relationship. When is it time to let go? Hey, that is very relative.
Kubali.
Kubali.
Achika.
I think if you're asking the question.
If you're asking the question.
That's a good sign. No, I'm not an expert.
But they'll tell us they have a life coach, they have a personal development coach, they have a relationship coach, and a marriage and family therapist. That's a pretty good lineup of experts to tell you when it's the right time to let go. So that's coming up in just a few moments.
Okay. Sisi tunawaacha. It's time for us to let go. Njiri, thank you very much for joining us today. He's a senior analyst at the Institute for Public Finance, and we've been talking about budget. Remember, we said as we head towards June, we have to educate ourselves on the budget and what we are expecting to see. Thank you for tuning in today. See you again tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday.
Tomorrow is Wednesday. Wisdom, war, and poetry.
Wisdom, war, and poetry.
Yes.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.